South Africa's official unemployment rate has increased by 0.9% from 32.7 in the first quarter of 2026 to 33.6% in the second quarter of 2026. This is according to the quarterly labour force survey released by Statistics South Africa yesterday. The number of unemployed people has risen by 345,000 to 8.5 million. Young people are bearing the brunt of this crisis, with over 5 million young people out of work. But the number of unemployed youth continuing to rise. What is the missing link to solve South Africa's youth unemployment crisis? Let me introduce you to our guests. We've got three guests with us this morning. The CEO of the Youth Employment Services, of course, that's Ravi Naidoo, and the Youth Employment and Entrepreneurship Specialist at Momentum Group, Nkosinathi Mahlangu. And online joining us, we have a PhD candidate in Public and Development Management at the School of Public Leadership at Stellenbosch University, Luluto Mgweba. Thank you. Thank you to all of you for coming in. I'm jumping straight into it because this is such a massive topic that is almost impossible to discuss in this short amount of time. But let's begin with you, Luluto. We talk to the numbers now. The number of unemployed people, as I said, rose by 345,000, but employment fell by 16,000. Does this show that South Africa's central problem is now an inability to actually absorb new job seekers rather than simply retrenchments?
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for your question. Youth unemployment has remained a concern for a very long time in our country, as the unemployment data keeps on rising, as you have mentioned. So we need to find ways of working towards a reducing it. In my master's academic research, I tried to unpack pathways by exploring social and rural entrepreneurship and the role of youth entrepreneurs. So for me, this is to look for what the data doesn't capture, whether young people are being supported into pathways where they can actually get paid jobs or create these jobs. So most young people are starting their businesses, and these businesses are creating jobs. But there is a missing link whereby my research focused on these youth entrepreneurs who have a link with Co-Create Hub, Ranyaga Community Transformation, and Stellenbosch Network. And these hubs are located within the Stellenbosch local municipality. So these hubs are actually helping young entrepreneurs with mentorship skills, business skills, and networking opportunity. And they also give them resources like working devices, and they offer them some working spaces to encourage them to compete in the market and do good business. Yeah. So we need stronger entrepreneurship ecosystems such as these entrepreneurship hubs by providing a good environment where innovative ideas of young people can then focus on business skills or employability. So one of the major challenges that I would like to highlight is accessibility. We do not just have a job crisis here, but we have an opportunity crisis. Some young people, especially those in rural areas, they do not have access or network hubs, and they're not even familiar with the business application processes that are part of the requirements for starting or continuing with a business. So the missing link is not necessarily a lack of ideas or skills among young people to solve unemployment, but it is the entrepreneurship ecosystem that supports the innovation. Innovation is actually there. You can go to Stellenbosch, you can go to Ngeleni, for instance, and you will find a youngster operating their own small businesses, such as coffee shops, for instance, salons. They are also fashion designers, and they sell igota and amagwinya, fruit and veggies. So my research suggests that many young people do actually have a potential, but they often lack support. Yeah. So the promotion of these entrepreneurship hubs that I'm talking about can bridge this gap, as they can help young entrepreneurs with mentorship and business support to transform these ideas into sustainable businesses. Also, these businesses must also not get this support at the beginning of their stages, but must be supported throughout their operation.
Okay, great.
Because they need to
I think you've given us a great starting point for the conversation, and I see that we seem to be shifting mostly to the youth here, and Luluto, obviously this is her field of expertise, but it is the youth that we're very, very worried about. But in general, the unemployment rate is rising, and that's for everybody right now. There are many points that Luluto picked up here. So, Ravi, let me come to you. I mean, obviously, we know that government wants to grow the economy. That's what we're trying to do. But how do we absorb young seekers and job seekers when our economy is just not growing?
Yes, so clearly I think the key thing is also going to be around economic growth, right?
Yeah.
So just imagine if the economy was growing, if you had a magic wand and you could wave it and the economy could grow by 5% a year for 7 years, unemployment for everyone would come down from 34% to probably sub 17%. Massive impact, right? And to get that done, you'd need the government and businesses to go and attract investors, be much more decisive in getting business confidence going in key sectors. And so people take their money out of their bank accounts and they build new factories and offices, and that's where jobs comes from. So that's our big goal. But there are still things we can do, even while we're trying, and for some reason we can't make the move on economic growth, and we can talk about that. But there are still things we can do now to create jobs for young people, even while we are trying to get macroeconomic growth to move ahead. And there's 3 things I think if we did them, which don't cost extra money from the Minister of Finance, could probably unlock about 5 million jobs over 5 years. So these are like decisive things that I think can be done.
Good, let's go. What do you
say?
So,
I would say the first thing is you have the YES program. It's the largest youth employment program funded by the private sector, and government just sets rules. So at the moment, it generates more jobs than all 21-seaters combined, 45,000 jobs a year. It can be scaled up to 145,000, maybe 200,000. There's 2 simple rules that have to be changed around it, which I can come to. The second thing is we need a special dispensation for employment of people under the age of 25. So easier hiring, easier probation for companies. They must have access to free education, free public transport, a whole range of things, internet and so on. And also companies get wage subsidies for having them. Many countries have that special dispensation. We don't. And we think there's 1.6 million people trapped in that age group unemployed. So just make it easier. And the third thing is in terms of SMEs, because 90% of all the new jobs come from SMEs. And SMEs are not mini big companies. They are companies without HR departments, without tax departments. So you have a different tax rate for them, not 27%, it's 10%. You have different rules around hiring, and you help them grow and absorb people. And all these things are pro-growth. So I think while we're trying to get business and government to work together to grow the economy, you need to unlock the potential of young people to be role players in the economy, and you need to unlock the potential of SMEs where we are very constrained. Then that starts to kick together as a model. And I think these don't cost money. It's just rules, and it's action.
Well, I mean, it does sound doable, but the will needs to come in here, and we need to work around those. And in Nkosinathi, I want to ask, because everything we're talking about centers around the fact that the biggest problem is the youth. The biggest problem is the youth in this country. Sure. And the older generation obviously seems that over the past 15 years have benefited when it comes to jobs, but the youth are locked out. Why? Because what we heard from Luluto in the beginning was saying it's not the lack of skills, or perhaps it's not it's the lack of the right skills that the economy is looking for, not necessarily what the country needs. I don't know. You tell me, what's the problem?
Thanks for that, Leanne. I mean, looking at the population of South Africa, we are a predominantly young population to start with. And looking at the skills that young people are acquiring, they need to match the job opportunities that are waiting on the other side. So there is a gap that needs to be bridged in terms of what skills are we channeling young people to pursue so that they know that there is activity, economic activity participation opportunities awaiting them on the other side, which is why we find ourselves with a high unemployment rate when it comes to graduates. Because you ask yourself, now that a young person has graduated, they've got a piece of paper that should be able to open doors for them. However, it is not aligned with the skills or the demand of the workplace or the job environment in terms of how and what type of skills are needed in the workplace. So I think we need to start by bridging that gap and have a much more consolidated effort to say, what our institutions of learning are teaching in terms of skills, and what is the labor market ready to absorb, so that there is a match and there's something that our youth can look forward to. So there is a number of interventions happening across the country when it comes to youth unemployment, but we need to consolidate our efforts so that we know that what type of skills, which sectors, then we can be able to start moving in the right direction and even supporting those young entrepreneurs in the process.
I mean, we're living in a digital world, and it was actually so interesting having this last panel discussion that we had, looking at young influencers and how they are making a living in a very different world, and that, of course, being on social media, TikToks and Instagram or whatever it is as content creators. Yeah. So these are things that the youth are looking to. They are finding the skills in that field. And yet, perhaps maybe the problem is, and this is where, again, I'm going to come to you, Luluto, are we expecting the youth to fill positions that they're not really interested in? I mean, you told us what the youth are doing, whether it's coffee shops or, going into different kind of environments where they are entrepreneurs, but we're expecting them to come into a workforce that perhaps has been around for so long, and we are not changing the workforce to suit them. Perhaps talk to us about that. What do you think about this?
So I believe that young people are continuing to just create businesses and not only waiting for government to create jobs. So my point is that entrepreneurship is not only about starting these businesses, but if we can help in cultivating these youngsters who are problem solvers, innovators, and job creators to create their businesses, it can then contribute very greatly to our economy. So the beauty of youth entrepreneurship lies in the need of environmental support, that this creativity is needed, and they also need access to opportunities whereby they can meaningfully participate in our economy without any challenges that are blocking the progress of their businesses or cultivating those ideas into starting a business.
I mean, Ravi, if I come to you and ask you about this, because I mean, with YES, you mentioned YES, and that's something that is so important because you work directly with the youth. You know what the youth want, the skills that they have, and unfortunately, our education system is letting the youth down. There's no two ways about it, because when you look at the workforce out there, if you don't have a laptop or some form of skill when it comes to technology, you are going to get lost, because that's the world that we live in. But dealing with the youth, where are their strengths? Where are we not tapping into their strengths?
So I think what we find from the YES program, which has got a lot of data, is that young people are much more able to work in the digital economy, just naturally better than the over 50-olds or the over 40-olds, and therefore we have to lean into that. We have to try to ensure we are actually leveraging those skills. But what people are missing when they're young is they don't have that practical work experience. So you don't have that first job from which you can build. So you need a social network. You actually need to know. So these are things you get in your first job. So I think the more we can give these talented young people their first job, the more they can really go forward. In their careers. One
of the things that came up in our panel discussion last week was something where we are looking for a mold of the same person, somebody that looks good, has a great education, speaks English really beautifully. I come to work with all my devices already in hand, and I'm just that mold of something that's easy. Obviously that's what you as the corporate world are looking for. But that's not the majority of South Africans. The majority of South Africans are hustling to find a meal every single day. And if they come knocking on Momentum's door, you're not going to open it for them. I'm being real, and I think you can be real with me. So how do you help? What does Momentum do to help a situation like this? Because you earn a lot of money as Momentum. But is it going back to helping this bad situation we're in?
It's very important for us as Momentum Group to play a role in making sure that we have economic activity initiatives for our youth in general. Because looking at the work that we do through the foundation, we always find meaningful partnerships where we get young people upskilled throughout their journey towards employability. And the skill set that we actually, expose these participating young people to, these are the skills that could lead to sustainable livelihoods. We know that, as you've mentioned, Leanne, it's all about putting bread on the table, but we have to make it sustainable so that we know that the numbers that we are tracking are not going to take us back to a position whereby the entry-level jobs are not sustainable. Then we find the same young people back on the job hunt again, on the job market again. So we try and partner, with institutions where digital skills are in demand across various sectors. And what we have done recently is to also look within our business, within our sector, to say what other areas of business that can help bring about young people into employment. And we have recently started a financial advisor practice program whereby we're training young graduates into becoming financial advisors, because that's a career path that not many young people are aware of. But as a sector, we're saying this is what we can do over and above other skill sets that are cutting across all sectors. But this is one, target that we need to chase, but we cannot do it alone. Hence, we're saying collaboration is the way to go with institutions of learning, with government, with programs such as because we're all trying to solve for youth unemployment. So our efforts need to be consolidated for us to have some, movement in terms of those numbers.
Luluto, let me come to you very quickly. We don't have too much time, but just I want to ask you, when we look at these numbers, we now have 9.5 million young people outside of unemployment, education and training, and 6.6 million people in long-term unemployment. So which consequence is government actually underestimating most here? Because there are big problems that come with this. We talk about mental health deterioration, household dependency, anti-immigrant scapegoating, declining trust in democracy, high levels of crime, high levels of drug abuse. These are all the consequences of what we're dealing with. Perhaps help us understand this.
So it is very hard when it comes to youth unemployment, because we have fellow people, we have fellow youngsters, our mates who are experiencing this mentally, and this also leads to illegal activities that are also a challenge in our country. And this is where I often then think that our government really need to collaborate. The government institutions, all the sectors need to collaborate to come together and solve the unemployment issue, because young people are becoming more involved in entrepreneurship to try to fight these mental issues, to try to fight they being attracted to committing crime. So, but they need access to support systems. And this is where now the critical role of our local government is needed in terms of local economic development. So we need to spot the realities of youth entrepreneurs, such as accessibility to these support systems, and hubs can then be used as part of this ecosystem that must be created in order to accommodate young people to have ideas, to be active, to compete in the market.
Yeah, and that's what's it's all of these points are so important, but it's to actually it's to put them into place, because the dangers, I think we underestimate the dangers of what we're doing to the unemployed, and particularly the youth in this country. It's a boiling pot. I mean, I look at the National Development Plan, Ravi. I'm going to ask you very quickly on this one, because this time is killing me over here. I mean, the goal is to have an unemployment rate of 6% by 2030. I'm going to laugh at that.
Right.
How do we do that in 3 years? No. I mean, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It isn't going to happen, because it's not even dropping, it's rising. Right. Talk to me about this.
Right. So that plan was predicated again on the economy growing and on government being very efficient. So, those two things clearly. So you've missed, 2030 is gone now. There's different targets. And I think from where we are, but you have to start from where you are. So I think you always have to be very serious about the goal and very decisive. So I don't think youth employment is the top priority, actually, and growth. So I think what should happen is that government has to make it the top priority, youth employment. And so even when we talk about transformation, it must be how much is youth employment the top goal? And when we're talking about getting, economic growth that is the fire that lights everything else, how much is at the top goal? So I think all the rules, all the money, everything else, the KPI for everyone is top KPI. how is this bringing down youth levels of unemployment?
Indeed, and that's important because it's another repeated thing from what we discussed last week. There should be KPIs, that these are achievable. Let me leave one final closing word to you. I can't even ask you a question. Just tell me what message you want to leave with.
Well, the message I'd like to leave is that let's have one definition of employment. It's either job opportunities or sustainable jobs. And let us also support young entrepreneurs with programs that will give them market access, adequate mentorship and support so that they can also compete and help create these much needed jobs.
Thank you to all of you for being here today. Thank you. It's an important discussion, and one that if we do not sort this out very quickly, and we talk about this all the time, that ticking time bomb is getting louder and louder, and we need to see people in jobs. We need this economy to grow, and we need to see things changing. Luluto, thank you very much for joining us. Ravi, thank you. Nkosinathi, thank you very, very much as well for being with us here on the panel.